And hello, I'm Mitch Allen with Palm, and I'd like to start by thanking you for taking the time to tune into our webcast today. We've got a full hour planned for you, whether you've come to check out webOS for the first time or have been scouring the web for everything on webOS and hoping to hear something new. I've been with Palm since 2000 when I joined Handspring to lead the software team and have been involved with webOS since the very beginning. I'm thrilled to be representing our terrific engineering and product teams back in Sunnyvale who have just done a tremendous job on the design and implementation of webOS and are working around the clock right now to get the pre into stores as soon as possible and get the SDK into your hands and all developers' hands. We're all really excited to have a chance to share our work with you today. As Catherine said, I'm joined with Paul Kuzno, who heads our Palm webOS and SDK product management team.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to be actually monitoring the Q&A panel and just pulling off questions so that we can try and get to as many of them as possible. There's a lot of you on here, so just be patient and I'll get as many of the questions as we can answer.
Okay, so as Catherine mentioned, just submit your questions at any time by typing them into the Q&A portion of your window addressed to all panelists, and Paul will be pulling those together for the last part of the session. So I'll start with a brief overview of Palm webOS, but it's really going to be a recap and not a lot of detail. There's a lot of information on www.palm.com and a ton of coverage on the web. If you want to get more information about the OS features or see demos of the user experience, learn about the Palm Pre, then I suggest you go to the Palm website after the webinar and you can start there. But there's a lot of information out there. But we are going to cover it briefly for those of you that are new to this topic. Most of our time today will be spent on the Mojo framework and demonstrating the framework in action by building a simple application and walking through some code examples. As I said, we do plan to have time at the end to address questions. And as Catherine said, I know we won't be able to address everybody's questions, so I apologize in advance if we're not going to get to your question today. We are going to set up, in the closing, I'll tell you if you have questions that don't get answered today where you can post those questions, and we'll do our best to follow up after the session. I know a lot of you want to know more about things that I can't answer. That includes pretty much any question that begins with when, where, and how much. Our talk will focus strictly on the technical aspects of webOS, and as much as I'd like to address all of your questions, we won't be able to address any of the business or most marketing-related questions today. So let's start with a recap of webOS. If you've not heard much about Palm webOS, you should know that it is Palm's next-generation operating system. It was a system that was really designed about creating an incredible user interface that's optimized for handling multiple tasks and activities in a very elegant fashion. I like to say that it's a meld of a Windows-based or a window-based, I should say, a window-based OS, or in our case, a card-based OS, as you'll see, with a web browser. There's a lot to, we knew in designing the system that we really wanted to have a platform that was optimized for the web. There's a lot to like about a web browser, the search metaphor, the universal addressing model through URLs, the very simple, intuitive UI for going from page to page. But there's also a lot of issues with using a web browser in a mobile environment. You want to be much more task-oriented, event-driven in a mobile environment when you don't have time to sit down for browsing sessions. You want to be able to handle multiple applications, multiple tasks at a time, background processing, notifications, and you want to take advantage of the capabilities of the hardware that you're on. All these things are made more difficult, if not impossible, when you're working strictly within the confines of a web browser. So we've looked at how we can integrate those two concepts, the best of both, if you will, into one platform, which we call webOS. Applications, importantly, are built with standard web languages and standard web development tools to really optimize the platform again for bringing web content onto these devices. webOS has, in the chapter we published, we talk a little bit more depth about the architecture, but I'm going to touch just very briefly on the high-level architecture. As app developers, you're going to be mostly concerned with the application environment, which is the top lighter gray portion of this diagram. All the underneath that is really supported by a full-fledged embedded Linux OS, some really very sophisticated media communications and other sort of system-level technologies that support our applications and our devices. But in the application environment, you're going to integrate or interface kind of primarily with two components. The UI System Manager, which really handles all the user experience that you've seen. If you've seen any of our demos, it's all handled by this component in conjunction with the Mojo framework, which provides access to the system for the applications that are on it, including our applications. The Mojo framework includes UI APIs, widgets, and access to webOS services. Services can span other applications on the device that you can link into your application and then extend your application with the applications that we're shipping as part of webOS. Services can also include hardware capabilities that are exposed to applications or system OS capabilities that are exposed to applications, as well as web services and cloud services that are going to be translated to specific access points in the framework. So you can see it's a very broad set of capabilities in this framework, and we're going to spend more time today diving into that. To build applications, though, you really need to start with user experience. This has really been the design center for the platform, and you can't understand, I think, how to build a really optimal application without understanding the principles of user experience. The main view of a webOS device is very simple, with a status bar at the top, a quick launch bar at the bottom, from which you can launch your favorite applications, or you can launch the launcher from which all applications can be launched. When applications are launched, they launch into cards. There's a foreground card which takes up almost the whole screen. The card can be minimized when you're switching applications. In the centered illustration there, you can see our card view, which is the place in which you move between applications, foreground and background applications. And applications can also have multiple cards. And cards really represent activities or windows in our model. In this case, I'm showing an email application that has an account list on the left and then a compose window or card on the right, so I can actually have my email compositions in a separate card from my inbox and be able to refer back and forth. webOS is a very powerful notification system and a background model. We have several different kinds of notifications, pop-up notifications, which are fairly obtrusive, although non-modal, to get a user's attention for things like phone calls and calendar events. But there are subtle banner notifications that crawl on the bottom of the screen in the notification bar, which is hidden unless there are notifications. When an notification passes in front of a user, it shows up for a brief period of time and then leaves an icon optionally in the notification bar to remind the user the notification has occurred. The user can tap on the notification bar at any time, and they will get to the dashboard. The dashboard is another view that allows you to look at different applications that are running. In some cases, the dashboard is composed of multiple panels, which we refer to as dashboard panels. In some cases, these panels are static, simply showing information like the top panel, which has a message notification there, or the middle panel, which is a calendar reminder. But there also can be dynamic. The bottom panel there is a control or kind of control panel, if you will, for a music application, showing the current music title it's playing, or showing the kind of controls that you can use to manipulate the songs that are playing back. So you can put anything in a dashboard panel, pretty much you can put it within a window. So how do you build applications? Before we kind of dive into Mojo, let's do a little bit more background in webOS and talk about the application model. When we started working on webOS as an architecture, we kind of started from like where classic Palm OS was, a lot of most mobile operating systems, desktop operating systems, looking at a native client, kind of native client model where the user interface, the software logic, the data is all encapsulated within a single application that gets installed on the device. Web applications were starting to come along. Classic web applications move some of the user interface into the browser. But in the last several years, AJAX applications have become more interesting and really sort of becoming a more powerful application model as they move some of their logic and data along the user interface into the client. We were inspired by the AJAX application model. We liked it, but we really wanted to go further. We really wanted applications to be installed on the device like native applications can be done traditionally, and we wanted to be able to do more things with the applications than the AJAX model allows. So the webOS application model, webOS applications actually start their life on an app catalog. The user selects the application, they can install them. When they get installed, they get exposed in a launcher. When they get launched from the launcher, they get moved into the foreground. And then once in this card view, through this card view, the application can move back and forth between the foreground and the background. They can post notifications. They can create dashboard panels, and then thus have sort of a presence in this dashboard view. It's worth pointing out that webOS applications can take different forms. You can have a simple application with a single card that launches and runs. But an application can have multiple cards, as we said, multiple activities. And applications can have a different state, perhaps, or a different behavior when they run in the background versus the foreground. Back at those card applications where they have one card or multiple can also have dashboard panels. But there's also another category of application which really exists just as a dashboard panel, and this is more like a background application. We refer to these as headless applications, and these are applications that are more monitoring applications, maybe, and are purely event-driven. So you can think of the card view and kind of this card model as sort of a great place to manage your task-based applications, and your dashboard view is a place that we may manage your sort of event-driven applications. So now to build applications, we talked, this is a bit of a recap on webOS, and we look at Mojo is really the vehicle from which you build applications for webOS. Mojo is a JavaScript framework. We bundle it with every version of webOS. You reference the framework within your application, but you don't have to include a copy of the framework in your application. That's already provided for you in the operating system. We do include the framework as source and the SDK for reference. That makes it a fairly important thing, I think, for most app developers to be able to look at what they're using. And as I said earlier in kind of the overview, UI APIs, widgets, and services are sort of predominantly what the framework delivers. We use Prototype a lot in the framework, as well as in our core applications. We bundle a copy of Prototype 1.6.3 with webOS. While it's not officially part of the platform, we do make a lot of use of it, and it's available for you to use in your applications as well. So getting started, you would all you really need is the web. You just really need a web browser and a text editor, of course. It helps to know JavaScript. You don't need to be an expert. Mojo makes it easy even for novice JavaScript developers to build applications. In the SDK, we will provide obviously the framework. This wiki-based documentation. We're going to give you a lot more than a text editor and a web browser to work with. We'll have a full-fledged emulator for webOS with an inspector and debugger included that allows you to debug and develop your applications on the various desktop platforms, Mac, Windows, and Linux, as well as link to webOS devices for debugging there. There's some individual tools that we make available, such as creating projects, packaging apps, and these are made available as command line tools. We'll also offer these bundled into popular IDEs and text editors, such as Eclipse with the Tana Studio. There'll be a Mojo or webOS plugin that can be installed there, as well as some of the other popular text editors on Mac, Windows, and Linux. So let's look at demonstrating Mojo by using a sample application. I picked sort of a wide range of things to just give you an idea of what some of the different elements of the framework are. This is not going to be a very sophisticated app. It's going to be fairly simple, but we'll touch on some of the major areas. I'm going to kind of back up my boast by using a text editor in a web browser to illustrate this. Because I'm running on a Macintosh, I'll use TextMate and Safari. This is really just for illustrations, I said. I mean, clearly with the SDK, we're going to give you a lot more powerful tools, but I want to show you that it's really quite simple to build these applications. So at this point, I'm going to switch back and forth between the PowerPoint and these tools, TextMate and Safari. So you'll see a little bit of switching go on as we move from app to app. So you should see it switching now, and what you should see on your screen is the Safari window here, which I've shrunk to a kind of a mobile-sized window, and TextMate's empty window here. And the first thing I'm going to do is create an application using our command line tools. You're going to not see a couple of windows, which are Finder windows that don't quite come through in this format. But what I'm doing is naming the app and giving it an ID. So I've done that, and now I just have to reopen it. So now you should see the TextMate window in the screen. If you're not familiar with TextMate, this is the coding window, and this is where, as I work on the individual files, you'll see that show up on your screen in this area. and on the right is a project list, a project folder list. So let's start there. When the project generator runs, it creates a templated directory with the name of your project as the root directory, a main app folder, which includes your code. Assistants are where your JavaScript code goes. webOS applications follow a model view controller structure, and assistants are controller-like objects. They actually are instances of the controller object in the Mojo framework, and they work cooperatively to manage your application. Views is where the HTML goes and kind of all your presentation information. Models are not as strictly defined. Some applications will have fairly sophisticated models. Others, not any, but if you have them, we recommend they go there. Appinfo.json is actually an important configuration file. It's the file that allows the launcher to find your app and properly allows the framework to recognize your app. There's a couple of key properties in here. If you're not familiar with the JSON object, it's a key value pair type structure. The probably most important key in here is the ID. This needs to be unique. It has to be specific to your app. We use this ID a lot in the framework, particularly in the service calls to identify your app. So you want that to be unique. We recommend this reverse DNS notation as a way of getting a unique ID fairly simply. And all these keys are required for apps to be loaded. I'm not going to go through all of them. Another one of kind of prime interest is a title, which shows up at the top of your card. But this is our main configuration file. There's an icon for the launcher. You might store images in your images folder. We have a fairly conventional index.html, but there's a couple things that I want to point out here. One is that you do reference the Mojo framework in your script tag. Again, while you don't include the source of the framework in your application, you do need to load it. And then you'll see we've got a version reference here, and you'll see this naming convention throughout our HTML when we've created some custom tags for Mojo for things that we want you to include in your HTML for certain things. And you'll see this x-mojo tagging convention. In this case, it's just referring to framework version 1. I've created some boilerplate code, so if my demo works correctly, I should be able to run this app. This is a running app, and you can see it just simply loads this code into the window. So we built an app with that command. I'm going to switch back to the presentation now, and we're going to go and actually start putting something in the app. So we're going to add a scene, and I want to introduce stages and scenes. These are Mojo terms and structures for webOS. To create the kind of user experience that we designed, we felt that we had to do something formally above kind of conventional web kind of structures. So we came up with stages and scenes. Stages really has very much like a browser window or browser tab. It's a window. In our user experience, it refers to cards and dashboard panels, among other things. So a card is a stage, whether it's in this kind of full screen foreground view, or whether it's been minimized in the card view, or whether it refers to secondary cards, like this composed window. These are all stages. A dashboard panel is a stage, and so a dashboard is made up of multiple stages. So again, you're probably able to keep this sort of sorted out because this is kind of new terms to think about this as a browser window or a window. Scenes are what we put on the stage. Scenes are mutually exclusive views. You can only have one scene on a stage at a time. All apps have to have at least one scene. Most apps will have many scenes. And scenes are, again, similar, have a corollary in kind of the conventional web terminology with, I'd say the closest is a page, a web page. You click from page to page to as you go through in which each page showing up in the window. So it's pretty similar to that with scenes. You go from scene to scene, and a new scene shows up in the window. Scenes are really managed by the framework like a stack. So as you move from scene to scene, you're pushing scenes typically onto a stack, and when you move backwards, you're kind of popping them off the stack. So to illustrate that, we can look at this email example. This first scene is my account scene. I tap on an account item, and I get to the account's inbox. I'm pushing this inbox scene and then I tap on a particular message, and then I am getting this message scene. So the act of tapping pushes these scenes onto the stack, and then when I go backwards, I can use the back gesture in the user experience in our navigation model, which the framework will actually pop the scenes and move them back, or you can do that under your own code control to actually force scenes to pop back. So this is a kind of popping function. I go from the message view back to the inbox view, back to the account view. So scenes are a pretty critical element in our system. So let me go back to the coding window. We're going to add a scene to our application. So I also have a generate scene command here. So I'm going to tap on this, and I'm going to name my first scene imaginatively first. So this shows up, and then when I look at the folder view, I see that in my assistants folder I now have a first assistant. In my views, I've got a first folder and a first scene file for my view file. I'll talk about the stage assistant in a moment, but it's important to note that the first prefix here is not accidentally the same in each of these structures. The framework uses these the naming convention to actually coordinate the assistants with the scenes and be able to locate them. So the first thing I have to do when I add a scene, after I add the scene using the tools, I have to put the scene into this index.html file, and then let me just copy that stage assistant reference, and now I get my first assistant is going to be loaded when I launch the application. And while I'm here, I'll take out this boilerplate text so I can see it. And then before the scenes are actually, before any of the scene assistants are invoked, when the application is launched, the stage assistant is one of the first things that is launched. So the stage assistant is where I actually will push my scene. So I'll type this Mojo command, which is push scene. Makes it helpful, and we'll push the first scene. And you notice, again, I only use the prefix here. We use that really to identify the 5 scenes. Let's save this. And so let's just put some little text in here. Like so. So now when I reload this application, I should get our first scene. You see that pops up there. So let's make this a little bit more interesting. One of the things that Mojo provides, in addition to the APIs, is we also provide a whole suite of style classes, which you can use to style your scenes and modify the styles of your widgets. So we'll put in this. We'll put in this POM header style, and then we'll add a spacer. This particular style tends to overlap the text, so we want to be able to space the text out, space the text so it won't get overridden. It's always fun watching someone else type. Okay, so now we run it, we'll see something a little bit more interesting, which is this kind of header view, but it would be actually a little better if we had some text in there, so we'll just add another class so we can center the text. And there are more direct ways to do this, but I'm just taking this kind of simple route, like so. All right, so now when I run this, I should see my title for the scene in there along with my first scene. Okay, so we've got one scene. Let's add a second scene, which is equally imaginatively named second. So now when I go back to my directory, I'll see that I've got these additional scenes that have popped up in here. what I'm going to do here, I think, is just we're going to first, we have to always remember to go back and put the Scene Assistant into the index HTML file. There are some other ways to manage your sources, which we're not talking too much about today. It's probably the simplest. So I've added the Scene Assistant back into the index.html file. And what I'm going to do is let's kind of put something into this second scene. We'll use a different header here just for variety. This is the POM page header. It shows you, again, a couple of the scenes that we have. And we're just going to cheat a little bit and center it this way. And we'll just call this app 1, scene 2. And we'll close that off like so. Okay, so now I've got my second scene kind of markup, something to put up on the screen. I've got my first scene, but I need a way of connecting these scenes. So probably the simplest is to put a button on the first scene. So we also will take advantage of these styles to create a conventional HTML button, which we have a POM style for. We need to give it an ID. So I can reference this button from the JavaScript. I'll just label it and close it like so. Okay, so now we've created everything we need to do on the HTML side. We have to actually hook up these scenes. So now we're going to JavaScript. We haven't looked at any of these JavaScript files yet. So now we're looking inside a Scene Assistant. Give you some orientation here. The Scene Assistant starts with a creator-like function, which is called before the scene is pushed to instantiate the scene. Each of the scenes have 4 standard methods. A setup method, which is called before the scene is pushed, and this is where you set up your event handlers, set up the widgets, basically prepare for the scene to be pushed. You have an activate method, which is called when the scene is pushed. Most of your logic associated with the scene will go here, as well as any kind of rendering time activities that you need to do. When the scene is replaced on stage, because another scene is pushed on top of it, then this deactivate method will be called if there's anything you need to do, such as removing event handlers, for example. You do it here. And then when the scene is popped or the app is deleted, if the scene happens to be active, then the cleanup function is called. So we're going to add a listener for our button right in this event handler. We're going to use a Mojo event.listen. You can use add event listener, and you can use the prototype observe functions, but they don't work really across stages. So if you have a multi-stage application, then it won't you really need to be using the Mojo events methods and event functions. So it's a good idea probably to use them all along. So we'll define a listener onto just this button click, and we'll add an event listener to that, or our event handler, which we'll go down and add to the bottom here. And this is just simply another function that we're going to add to the scene. And we'll push the second scene. So you've seen this command before when we added the first scene into stage controller. We use the same command to push the second scene. So if I've done everything right, haven't made anything typos, this should actually allow us to push our first scene, and we see the button that gets us to the next scene, and we go to the next scene. So now we push the second scene, and I can swipe back, go back to the first scene, and so on. Very exciting. But it shows the principles of how you add these. You can add these individual scenes in, you can connect them, and then you can show how they function kind of by pushing and popping them. So let's go back to the presentation. That's sorry. A little navigation trouble here, so I'll go back to the presentation. And let's talk about widgets. So widgets are in Mojo, widgets is a term that's actually used quite a bit in web development, and we are using it in yet another different way. We tried pretty hard to find a better name, but it seems as good as any to describe what we're doing. So widgets, there's quite a few widgets in Mojo. They fall into a bunch of different categories: buttons and selectors, lists, menus, text fields, dialogues and containers, pickers, viewers, indicators. There's dozens of widgets that you'll be able to access. They all pretty much work in a similar way. You declare your widgets in the HTML using a div with an XMojo element tag that identifies the widget that you're going to be using. You have an ID associated with that, so you can reference it from your JavaScript. In your JavaScript, you'll set up the widget by referencing that ID or name. It just has to be a unique DOM way of getting to the element in a unique way. Each widgets typically have attributes, object, which defines kind of static properties that tend to go into the widget at setup time. In this case, I'm defining a toggle button, and I'm defining that its model property is going to be named value. And then the other object is common to widgets is the model object, which has more dynamic data associated with it. It's often where the value of the widget is stored. If it's a value holding widget, and other dynamic elements. In this case here we have a true value that's assigned by default to the toggle. So that means when it's rendered, it will show up in the on position. Toggles can be disabled dynamically, and we're saying that we don't want it to be disabled in this case. And then you can set up a listener. Each of the widgets have different events that they may be relevant to them. So if you're interested in processing or putting in some logic as a result of a widget being some interaction with the widget, then you would set that up here. In the case of the toggle, it reacts to a property change event when it's toggled. That's what you'd be listening to with this piece of code. Lastly, you can override the conventional. There's a lot of default styling. All widgets are styled by default, and they have a default behavior associated with that style. In some cases, you can override that style either by overriding the class as a whole, or in this case, I'm just referencing the individual widget ID and saying that I want it to be aligned left or the left instead of right, which is the default behavior for a toggle. So let's go back once more to the coding window, and what we'll do here is add a widget into our scene. So what I'm going to do is go into the first scene, and we're just going to add a text widget here. And I'm going to cheat a little bit since I think it's boring to watch me type. I want to leave more time for questions, so I'm going to simply cut and paste some of these code segments now. So I've added a text field div into this scene, and I've named it my text. Now I go into the scene assistant, and here I'm going to set up the widget. So again, I'm going to cut and paste the setup code. So I've created an attribute object. I've set up some hint text, which is a property for text fields, which hints to the user what to type. And I've said I want it to have focus when the scene is rendered, when the scene is pushed. And then I've set up the widget here, referencing those two objects as well as the text ID. So that is that's going to result in the widget being set up. Now I want to do one other thing, which is just to illustrate for you that we can pass arguments to our scene. So now when the first scene pushes to the second scene, it'll also pass the value of the text field with it. So the scene functions or scene stack functions are designed to pass really opaquely all the arguments that you may append kind of beyond the scene identifier that is used to push the scene. Okay, so now let's go into the second scene. And because we're getting an argument, we will indicate that we're going to do something with that argument. And we have to handle the arguments at the creator function level. So I'm just going to assign this argument to a controller property so we can retain it. And then in my activate function, when the scene is active, I'm going to just simply assign it to something that we'll put into the scene. So we'll use the handy prototype functions here to identify the scene element, and we'll just assign it to the text that's passed in, like so. So now we've set up this scene for this, and we just have to create the element that we'll add it to. So this will be just a text string. We'll add a span, the ID color, and close that off. So again, if my cut and paste and my typing has worked out, then now I'll see a text field in the first scene with some hint text. I can enter a color, and then I can push to the next scene, and I see that color is passed to the next scene. Obviously, I don't have to type real colors because I'm not really checking anything, so I'll just type what looks to be a color. So now we've added scenes to our application, and we've added widgets to our application. So we've shown some of the things that Mojo can do. Let's look at a few others. And for these next 3 examples, I'm going to just show you the code kind of in the presentation format, so you can kind of see how we would do it and we won't actually demonstrate it. The next is storage. Every application, one of the nice things about kind of the Mojo and webOS applications, by running locally in the device, you have access to local storage. webOS includes support for the HTML5 database APIs, so you can use those APIs if you are interested in designing your own databases and using fairly specific database functions to access them. But many developers simply want sort of a convenient way to store simple amounts of data, so we've created a wrapper around those APIs in Mojo called Depot. Depot does some fairly simple functions to create or open a database. This really just simply creates a database that's going to store a single object. You can then have save and get functions that simply save an object to this database or retrieve an object from the database. So it's a fairly simple wrapper, but it does simplify things for people who are not interested in getting their hands dirty in the database APIs. We also have a cookies function which allows you to store small amounts of persistent data, and its name kind of implies what its intended use for. And we see it for preferences, versions, and things like that, where you want some simple, fast access to small amounts of data. So there's several options if you want to store local data using Mojo. Mojo has a number of functions for notifications. We mentioned a little bit this in the user experience section. I'm showing a code sample here for banner notifications. There are also pop-up notifications and things related to dashboards that kind of fall into a related category. So here with this this code segment here, I'm creating a simple banner notification with a text string and an icon using the show banner method of the controller. So you can see here I just simply assign an icon path in a message string, and then it shows up as a banner notification. So again, relatively simple, pretty easy ways to put up notifications. And then the last of the Mojo demonstrations are really related to services. So there's quite a wide variety of services. They all work in fairly similar ways. Services, again, can be other applications that you launch, like the browser if you want to launch a web page, or you might want to launch the Photos application and look through a series of photos. These are other applications that you use to extend your application. There are also device services like the GPS or the accelerometer, which are hardware capabilities that we expose to the applications, or cloud services, things that are web services that we'll encapsulate. They all work pretty much the same way. The service call, which is really you all use the service request method of your controller. You identify the location. You identify the service that you're going to make use of using this type of notation. So here I'm specifying the location services is what I'm after. There's a specific method of those services that you're going to use. In this case, we're getting a fix. And then there's a parameter block that's associated with that particular method. These parameter blocks are method dependent, so they'll vary based on the particular method and service that you're accessing. These are a callback. These are asynchronous events, similar to the storage example I gave you earlier. So there's a number of asynchronous functions in the system, so you'll have to set up callbacks for services to be able to receive, in this case, the data that comes back from the get fix request would have to be processed in a callback, or if there were a failure associated with it. I've done 2 simple callbacks here that don't do much of anything. You obviously need to do more than that to simply log the response, but it gives you an idea of the structure. So we've kind of gone through this pretty quickly, I realize. There is, we've talked quite a bit about Mojo framework and done an overview of webOS, but it's still pretty early. I mean, we haven't obviously shared all the details with you. There's a lot more to come. You can learn more, as I said, on www.pom.com is a good place to start for official information. There's a lot of other web resources. You can see there's a number of even pre or web specific web sources that web resources have jumped up. As a developer, you want to check out things like the predevcamp.org, which is a group that's looking at doing dev sessions around the SDK when it's available. And so there's a lot of other unofficial and informal resources for you to draw on as well, which I suggest that you check out. The developer.pom.com has a place for registering for any updates, and that's a good place to go if you just want to be kind of hear about things as they happen from us. So with that, I'm going to open up the Q&A session and turn it over to Paul. Paul, we have some questions that.
Yeah, we have plenty of questions. I've been trying to rapidly cut and paste things around. So I'm going to basically give a summary of a lot of the themes that I saw in terms of questions and try and get Mitch to address them. So, Mitch, we have several questions on the suitability of this platform, particularly for gaming development. I wonder if you can kind of address directly what you think, how this environment actually is suited for developing games on the platform.
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, webOS was designed really around a web experience, around web types of applications and web content. So there are some great web-based games out there, and they'll work really well in this environment. And we expect to see a fair number of them on the platform. Clearly, there's other category games that need deeper access to hardware and system services. The platform isn't supporting those optimally these days. It is something that we intend to improve upon as time goes on. But for now, sort of web-centric games is really will play best on this platform and others over time.
Okay. There's also a number of questions here about just the general networking capabilities of the webOS. Can you give an overview of how networking works for webOS apps?
Yeah, it's like you're going to have the system is actually going to manage your data connections for you. We have on the pre both Wi-Fi and WAN as an example, and we will prioritize one over the other and kind of give you sort of the best the data connection that we can. So you can rely on the data connection to be there. There are some services that allow you to find out, well, what is Wi-Fi available or is WAN available if you're particularly interested in that. But we really say is, look, the data connection will be there. You just really ask to have a data connection. We provide it. I didn't show any examples here, but one of the great features of the prototype library, for example, is the AJAX functions that they offer, and you should be able to use AJAX functions, right within your code if you roll your own or use some of the prototype functions. So those should all be available to you.
Okay. There's a number of developers here concerned about the privacy of their application code, given that Mojo app model and the languages that we're using. What's your sort of advice about how to deal with that issue?
Well, we're pretty concerned about it. We're still looking at it. I don't think we've got any concrete advice to offer yet. I think when the time the SDK comes out, we'll be advising developers around that. I think, quite honestly, the community is a bit split. Web content has been fairly exposed, as been provided, and many people who are providing web services and web applications have found ways to protect their applications on the server side. Now, for embedded developers and people who are really running purely on the client, that's a lot more of a challenge. So I'm not really able to here today to say, hey, do this or do that, but we'll have some guidance for people as we come out with the SDK. It is a big concern of ours, and we want to do the best thing for both the developer and for the user around that.
Okay, so going back to talking about the fact that we are using web technologies and also building on the conversation that we've embedded prototype, we have a number of developers who are interested in having their favorite JavaScript library be a part of their application, whether it's jQuery or Dojo or YUI. Is that a possibility, people, in terms of developing in that manner?
We expect it to be. We really expect that other JavaScript libraries should work compatibly, in this environment. We tested some. I can't say that we're going to test them all kind of exclusively, but that is our intent. You should be able to include other libraries with your application, as well as using the services that Mojo offers or Prototype offers.
Okay. I got a number of questions here, kind of asking. So, what about the apps that we've demonstrated? Are those built using the same technologies that we're expecting application developers to use?
Yeah, the whole user experience of our core applications is using the same capabilities of the framework that application developers will have.
Okay. And then another question about just styling of applications, whether people can actually override the CSS that we have provided. What flexibility will they have to design an application?
Yeah, I showed a very trivial example of that in the widget demo where I showed overriding the particular style of a toggle button. But we have a lot of we have actually quite a few styles. There are styles specific for widgets, and there are styles that we use within scenes. We're going to publish those styles as part of the SDK so that you understand kind of what styles we're using. You'll be able to override them in your CSS. You'll be able to add your own styles. You can create widgets with your own style tags that will be used in that you can use to style your individual page.
I have a number of questions about, given that we're using a web model, and I think you talked a little bit about this when you talked about data storage, but I have a number of questions still asking about the ability to have the applications remain useful when they're not connected. Can you maybe reiterate and talk about some of the storage capabilities and how they use that to make the apps useful offline?
Yeah, that's actually really important because we view that the local storage is there for two major purposes. One is for offline access. These are still intermittently connected devices. We hope for ubiquitous kind of connectivity at some point in the future, but obviously people use these devices offline all the time. So applications should run when they're not connected. You should cache your data. You can use the depot functions or HTML5 functions to store data that you've pulled down from your web sources for the data if you have dynamic data, and that should be available when the user launches the app. Even stale data in most cases is better than no data for these applications. So you can use these storage functions for that. While I'm on this topic, the other sort of major purpose is really just for caching. If you have connected operations that are going to take a long time, it's good to have cache data available that you can use. So you're actually putting stuff on the screen when the app is launched, and not forcing the user to look at blank screens when you're waiting on data coming down from the web.
Okay. People are asking a lot about the topic that you touched on briefly near the beginning around headless applications, and what access do headless applications have to run in the background? How customizable are the dashboard panels that people actually use when they're using a notification panel? So maybe you want to go back a little bit over that model of what a headless application is.
Sure. So let's start with a headless application. A headless application is an application that doesn't have a card, but has a dashboard panel associated. Any application on the device has to have at least one window up. We don't at this point have support for applications that can be purely background, but they have to have at least one window up. We've shown that. Inside that window, like the dashboard panel, you should be able to do almost anything that you can do in a window. You've got a stage associated with that. You've got the kinds of things that I've shown in the demonstrations that you can draw. I mean, I realize everything I showed was really related to cards, but you can translate that to dashboard panels.
There's a lot of questions and a lot of topics about the app catalog and everything. I know we can't go into all the details about it, but why don't you sort of reiterate what we have talked about on the app catalog previously in terms of its existence and the format in terms of getting apps onto the device.
Yeah, I can't really say much more than it's already been said around this. I mean, there will be an app catalog. There will be an application on the device that allows you to load it. It will be the way that we get apps on the device at launch. I think there'll be a lot more information, I think, coming out over time. But that's about all that we're able to talk about today.
Okay. Other question is a lot about platforms. I have one person asking about, please confirm that I can develop an app on Linux just like Mitch did on his Mac. And I think you did talk a little bit earlier about the platform support, but maybe we can just reiterate that.
Yeah, that's our intent, is that we would support Mac, Windows, and Linux equally with the tools that we offer now. If you're using, obviously there are different tools available on different platforms to support it, but in terms of our tool set, we're intending to target all three platforms.
There's a related question around bundles and tooling bundles about, will tooling bundles be available for this, that, or the other text editor? Maybe you just want to talk about our general approach there. Yeah,
we do intend to make some available for some text editors. We're not, clearly saying yet which one, but you can probably imagine, suppose using TextMate, that's probably one of them. In Eclipse with the Asana Studio is the other one that we're using heavily now. We don't at this point know how many at what time, but our intent is to make them available. We also don't know if it's possible for us to, with the command line tools being available, if it would be easy for people to roll their own bundles So we're still looking at some of that stuff like that, but there will be some, there will be the command line tools available, there will be some bundles available, and there'll probably be some way that people can roll their own bundles if we're not addressing that.
Okay. There's a lot of questions about performance here. I mean, maybe you want to just talk in general about how we feel about device performance. I think a lot of people are more used to JavaScript performance on a desktop and everything, and worried about our apps going to be responsive. I think we've shown that a little bit in the demos that we've given so far, but I think it's maybe useful to talk a little bit about the work we've done there.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of work, and performance is very, very important to us. We knew that the success of this model was really relied on having really excellent performance. And I actually just refer people back to the demonstrations. If you look at on the POM website and some of the videos there, or even some of the other blog sites and stuff that have captured their own videos, you can use that to see the kind of performance we're getting. We expect that you would get the performance that's very similar to those demonstrations. We do hope to offer tips and techniques, and we've learned things about how to get more performance out of the apps, and we'll share with you what we know. We hope that we think that really the model itself does lead to good performing apps, and we'll do our best to guide you to get to that on your own apps.
Let's see. A lot of questions that start with when, which I'm not answering right now. Let's see. One question here, which I think is useful in terms of the again going to customizing the look and feel, asking about those bars that we have available. Is it possible to get an app into full screen mode in terms of if they want to actually have something that has in full screen, and how we handle resizing the applications as things like notifications come in and overlay the UI?
Yeah, the built-in video player and I think actually the picture viewer do go full screen. The system has a capability. I don't know where we stand in terms of that particular feature and how third-party apps will access it. But we do realize there are some applications where that's an important element, is to be able to hide the status bar, especially in how we handle notifications. I'm not really prepared today to talk about how that works in detail, but we recognize it as a specific application mode that needs to be supported.
But then even I think there is probably useful in terms of a lot of people are wondering about what the application developer's burden is to be able to resize when a notification comes in, or what will be handled for them at the system level.
Yeah, that is handled for them at the system level. So the notification bar, the system manager actually allows brings the notifications through and resizes your window as an application window. There are some things that you need to do to be friendly to that, and there are things you can do to be unfriendly, and those are things that we'll lay out in the SDK.
So here's a general question, which is just about, okay, in advance of the SDK coming out, what would you suggest people look at in terms of skills they're trying to acquire, other than just, okay, well, you should know JavaScript? Are there any things that you would recommend, technologies people sort of read up on as sort of getting ready for when the SDK is released?
Yeah, well, I mean, JavaScript, the JavaScript language itself, of course, is probably the most important. If you're not an experienced JavaScript developer or having worked much with it, you definitely want to get some, to do some work in that area. I know, O'Reilly themselves have a lot of great JavaScript titles and things that they can offer as a resource, and there's plenty of resources on the web. That would be the main one. I think that you subscribe to the developer.com site so you get information from us and the material that we're putting out. But beyond that, there's probably not a lot more to do until we release the SDK.
Okay. 1 minute over. Let's see if I have any final questions that I feel like need to get answered. Questions now have just degenerated to just having when.
Yeah, well, I can imagine.
Let's see here. I'll answer a couple questions. I've gotten a lot of questions about the slides being available and everything. We talked about this at the beginning, but a lot of people joined over near the end. So these slides and the audio, I know people complaining about the audio, is going to be available and posted on O'Reilly's site. So that stuff is going to be available. I think we're pretty much at the end of the list of questions that we can answer now. So I'll hand it back over to our moderator, and I think we're pretty much wrapping up.
Great. I want to thank you both, gentlemen. That was a wonderful presentation. I could tell by the comments that people were getting a lot out of it. And I also want to thank everyone who joined us here today. We really appreciate your participating. We'll have a recording available soon. Usually it takes us a day or two to get it up. We have to convert it and post it, but I will send an email to everyone who's registered for this event, and you'll get a link to the recording. And just one last time, thank you so much. Oh, one more question people were asking. Is the best place to go, people were asking about continuing this conversation. Do you have a forum on your site or a resource that you can point them to?
Yeah, I think that it is the last URL that we had on the developer.palm.com is basically the center point for all the information we have, both in terms of people signing up to get more information. It's where we're posting the latest information, and it's where we're offering the opportunity for people to interact. There is, you can place comments on the PDN blog and the like. So there is a number of resources available at that location, and that's where we'd like to point people to who want to stay in touch and continue the conversation.
Great. Great. Well, everyone, thank you very much, and I hope we can have you back again soon to do another presentation.
All right. Well, all right. Thank you, and thank you again for attending, everyone.
All
right. Bye.